I've maybe talked about this before, maybe written about it in comments before, and wherever. That if we was to get away from uh, society as a like police, they want to defund the police, and I was thinking the best way to do this would be to well, I thought about this way years ago when I was a kid and stuff. I was like, instead of having police all in the precinct and they're in uniform, because if you see a cop car, no criminal does any, nobody does anything around a cop. Maybe somebody does, or they want to get ballsy or something. They say, "Hey, watch me spin out" or whatever. Most of the time, people slow down. They see a cop car or whatever. They don't do a crime. They're not going to sit there and rob somebody when a cop car goes by, as they would if just a normal car goes by. And so what I came up with was you divide. Well, you say you got a state, and then you have to divide it for population. As far as instead of having sheriffs and all these different locales, you divided in population to where you have one house and maybe a car, and that's where a cop lives for however many. Well, I don't know what it is now. However many people they watch over now, but they'll have a certain sector. This one cop that lives in this house doesn't need to have a cop car. However they deal with the situation. Now that area gets funded just like all areas get funded. It starts out the same. All areas get funded, by the taxes. As far as he gets food, and his house is paid for, his car is paid for, and he'll have a stipend, or I don't know how much. Not right now. It's just the idea. So they live in this house with a certain amount of people that they would patrol, and those people would be have to report to him for if they had trouble, they report to him. Anything in their sector, they know it's him, and that's it. Him, her, whatever, and they would report to that one person for and it would just cover however many people's in that sector. Everybody all have the same amount of people in the sector, so they wouldn't, and it would be they would be welcomed in that area for whatever reason. Say it was whatever ethnicity, racial, it might be religious, whatever. But they would be accepting him in that area because he would be like maybe he'd be one of them. So he does all the policing and all the reporting, and then it would just go from, instead of having to keep a precinct and having people, he would just they'd wake him up or whatever, and he would do that 24/7, 365. Now I guess they could have people give breaks, have standbys that if he wanted a vacation, then they'd come live in the house while he was on vacation, whatever. So to control corruption, because if they lived in that area, they're going to let them get by with everything. Okay, so the funding that goes to that area, say for whatever, because taxes go to each, like districts and all that stuff. Each district gets their taxes, depending on. Well, that would be the same on this. If there's crime in that area and they're allowing the crime in that area, the funding would drop. You wouldn't get more for having, because you penalize crime, you don't fund it. So you don't pay them more money because they're doing more crime. You don't say, well, they need more money. No, you don't do that, because that'd be giving them more money. And if there's corruption, then they're allowing that. So you cut that back. Now, if those people are leaving there to keep the crime from happening in that area and losing funding, they would jump border and be doing crime in another sector. Say they're stealing or selling drugs, whatever it was. Well, when they got caught in that other sector, then the punishment is still come back to it wouldn't, they, just because they doing crime in another sector doesn't mean that sector, the crime in that area, would be lost. The sector would be lost. And who cares, if they replace this cop, if this cop was, he could go under scrutiny and find out if he was corrupt or whatever. Or, maybe not even call it a cop. Maybe he's a civil servant. And that would be a better name for it anyway, because that's basically what he'd do. He'd be arbitrating and stuff like that to a certain point, to whatever ability they had to do that to. And his house would be maybe have an office, added onto it for paperwork or whatever that. But as far as jails and stuff, that's they're already privatized. So that would be he would just have to find whoever it was and then call the local the district or whatever, however they had the jails, and then have them picked up and then do that. But that would be as far as because right now I don't know if they crime in certain areas are really bad, but they still get funding? See, I mean, and you couldn't, if you were found to, and that's another thing, areas of, say this just started across the country. You couldn't just start in an area, because you'd have to start across the country, and it all had to be divided up. You think, well, do a test section first. Well, you only do something. You should only move forward on something after you thought everything through and ran through all the scenarios possible, and you've studied it and made sure that's the way you do it. You don't do it like they do it nowadays. They run some idiots that call themselves legislators and politicians and lawyers and such, and they get to sit around and talk to it real slow and real boringly. And they claim, well, what if he tied his shoes wrong, tripped somebody because he was leaning over and this person fell and they claimed they was tripped? Yeah, well, that's going to be an arbitration, isn't it? But that's how these legislators are. They take stupid scenarios that wouldn't happen, and then they punish people. They try to make a law into it and everything else. But there's also a thing where this would be better if the planet was like this, that you would have countries that to move from one sector to another, you would have to say there was a sector. Well, nowadays you couldn't really do any. I mean, you'd have to have certain sectors that would already be this way that I'm about to tell you. That say that they had say that there was civil obedience, meaning they didn't litter, they were proper citizens, they did everything right. They didn't have, they had their freedoms, unlike they didn't have, how what do they call them, houses that are in air, where you have to pay, associations. It's almost, it wouldn't be like that, because you wouldn't have to pay. Everybody'd be paying the same tax. Wouldn't matter if you was in a wealthy area or a bad area. Everybody would be paying the same tax. And you'd be saying, well, to move from one, say after this was implemented, and this area became saturated with crime, and there's no funding, and everybody wanted to move out, but they couldn't, because to move to another area, you'd have to prove yourself civil enough or rely. You'd have to prove. See, they'd have different groups, different groupings of like from the worst to best. Because after a while, some people are, crime is going to because criminals don't care, and if you don't do anything about them, if you don't get rid of them, then your area doesn't improve. And if they don't rehabilitate, then they go right back to doing what they was doing. And the way for them to rehabilitate is you have to raise everybody properly to realize that not everybody's going to be a millionaire. And not everybody wants to hear that. A lot of people say, well, I could be a criminal and be a millionaire, and that'd show you. Well, with this system, you couldn't be a rich criminal in a rich, wealthy area. You couldn't get. You'd have to get voted in, but you'd still have to meet the stipulations of, like, say if you had the laws of the area, you'd still have to meet all those laws of that area. Say whatever, all the laws and stipulations to move into that area, community, whatever it was with this one, where this one civil servant would be operating. And you'd have to pass, it'd be like going into an apartment where you have to pass like a verbal audit or a verbal meeting, whatever they call those things, where you, oh man, I'm getting so blocked by words now, or blocked from words now that it's not funny. So anyway, so you have all these areas that you could move to. You could better, if you bettered your life, but you could only move up in stairs. You could only move up in stair steps, because if you got rich in an area, you don't just move there because you got wealthy. You still have to be you still have to meet the everything of that area. You couldn't just be rich and say, well, that's a rich area and I'm going to get rich and move to that area. You couldn't do that. You had to meet all the stipulations. Say maybe they were all of a certain, if they wanted their ethnicity or their religion or something like that in this area to stay that way, that would be like going to church and saying, well, we're going to, I don't know what kind of church it'd be where you'd allow any type of religion to be practiced. I don't know what, one day you get a evangelical, the next day you get a Christian, next day you get or next Sunday you get a Catholic, and then you get a Hindu, and you get a Buddhist. I don't know. I've never heard of a church. There might be one where they all sit around and they philosophize. That'd probably be just some college campus where they sit in a room and do that. It'd probably be where sounds more like a philosophy church. But anyway, church of philosophy. Anyway, so you'd have to meet you'd have to meet the demands of these areas, and it would have to. I don't know if the surrounding areas would have to agree on that area running stipulation, because if there was an area that there would be a basic. You start out with basic rules and regulations for an area. Now you can upgrade them, but everybody has to agree. Everybody that lives in the area has to agree. It's not, you can't do a 60% vote and have 40% people dislike. You're automatically on the dislike. And so if you wanted to move to those kind of areas, you might get on the internet and say, hey, what kind of, how can we, can we get this kind of area? And then you work on that and maybe move to that area, and then you upgrade that area, because everybody in the area would say, yes, we all want to live like this. That way you could all live in that sort of situation. But you could never use that against it. You couldn't force your rules of that area into, say, if any neighboring, kind of like Russia is now. You couldn't. It's like Russia trying to enforce everything on Ukraine. Well, you couldn't do that. You'd have to. Your rules were in their area, and if you were outside the area, it was basic rules for every. If you were outside of your area, the basic rules, which everybody started as, would have to be adhered to. You wouldn't have to go through. Say if you was in the poor or the a bad neighborhood and you went to this rich neighborhood, if I don't know if I wouldn't say you'd have to have a, because you're driving through it, you wouldn't have to. You'd only have the basic rules to drive through any other place. Everybody lives under the basic rules, but when you're in your area where you live, then you live by those more upstanding rules or more upgraded rules. So that way nobody'd have to know the rules of every place. You just have the basic laws and rules to live by when you travel from state to state or county to county or district or area to area. And I mean, it'd have to get rid of crime because I mean, unless and if crime did melt to a certain area, it'd be easier to handle, and you could call in the military to deal with that. I mean, you're still going to have a military as long as you have other countries, until all the countries say decide to have just one military, like a unified military for the whole world, which would cut down. We wouldn't need nukes. I mean, all these. If we had one military, and I did a video on this. I don't know if it's. I do so many videos and I just forget to put them up, so they disappear. So maybe that's what happened. Is but anyway, if we had a one military where like you take everybody, all the countries pay into it to protect in time. Say if there's a criminal uprising, you're still going to have police in your country or the civil servants or whatever it is. But if you needed it, if the criminals tried to overrun a government or something like that, then you could call in this it'd be a one world military. But and then they go in and everybody, all the countries would have to agree to the movement, and it'd have to be a quicker kind of a. Of course, this communism, all these socialism, you'd have to have one world economy where everybody's living out the same thing as these rules. You could have different rules in your country, sure, but if another country comes through, they live by the basic rules of the planet. And you come through and say you're driving through and you're stopped to get a sandwich in this country. You live by the basic rules. So all you have to do is abide by the basic laws, like you don't kill and steal and stuff like that, or whatever everybody comes up with. And that's how you travel. You don't have to know these spatial laws about our religion, these spatial laws about that's when people pass through. You're just going to have to be compatible, or what is it, where you just allow people, because if you're going into another area and they don't like the way you're dressed, say if you're in religious garb and you go to another area and they're like, wow, we dress in black and gray here, and you come in there and you're all sparkly because you're some who knows, you're space religion or whatever, and they can't say anything. All you have to do is live by the rules in that area. Well, I thought, that would be a better way, instead of having police go into an area that they don't like the police. They in this scenario, they have basically voted in this person to live among them. Maybe it was one of their own, and they said he's an upstanding in this, and he got appointed, because basically if we're paying taxes, everybody's getting taxes to this one person. It's not this just one county. Or one county, or not a county, or one district, or whatever area is paying for this. It's still coming out of like federal funding or state funding or whatever it is, and it's still going to pay for him. And instead of having a police force, and they go into an area, and what if this guy? What if this guy gets overran? Well, then he wasn't really in charge of his area. And that's when the military will come in and if the military comes in, then there's going to be a lot more people involved. The people that are allowing these criminals, like you say, if their kids are running around in gangs, you're going to lose funding. You're going to lose funding for all this, and it might come in the way of maybe if there's a water filtration system, your water gets dirty. Would you want to drink dirty? What are you going to say? You're going to say, "Oh, well, I don't want to drink dirty water." And your food isn't going to be, when it comes through, it's, uh, I don't know. You'd have to. I don't know how you get your own food if you had a store there, or a couple stores, or everybody had a store. You're still gonna have to buy it. And if you're in too many people in competition, which is stupid anyway, and you all have the same thing, and you just think, well, I'm just gonna do this and that, and then everybody charges a higher price. But anyway, I'm just saying a different way. All these people talking about defund the police, and I thought about this before. Defund the police. It wouldn't be defunding them. It would just be accepting who you have to patrol in your area, and your area would be, if your area was really pristine, or really, and it really became a great area because everybody was doing everything right, and it's just whatever, all the different stuff that, because you're going to be working and everything else. And everybody's going to say, wow, what a nice area. What'd you do to, they're going to say, well, we should do that. And then there's going to be a lot of movement from people saying, well, wait, we don't want to, you're not paying for it. You're getting rewarded for having a better area. So people that want to have crime, they're not going to get to live in these mansions. They're not going to be accepted into area where there's mansions, because if they're criminal, they're not going to be allowed to leave the area to upgrade to a mansion just because they got a bunch of money. So they're going to be stuck to live right around where their criminal degradation is existing. And when they go and try to take their crime into another area, let's see, how did I got it written, I think I got it written down how all this works. How if they go into another area, then that area, maybe that's what they find, that the whole area has to pay for, like, say, if there's one criminal goes over there, vandalizes another area, then that area charges the other area that had the criminal come in, the criminal, where the criminal is from, and they charge that whole area for the crime, not just the person. The person gets charged physically, but the area gets charged for allowing a criminal to exist in their area. And so if you had people running over and saying doing $1 million worth of whatever damage, whatever kind of, whatever the, and the charges would all be, it would be across the board. You'd say, well, we have real rich houses in this area. Well, and they came over, well, it would be according to, the damage done, of course, but the charges would still be equal to they'd still be equal. Like, say, a murder here would be the same as murder here. You couldn't say, well, this person was poor or this person was rich, and so, and then try to change the story. This person should get off and this person should go to hell. No, it's the same thing. It's equal across the board punishment. So you're not going to have a rich guy going across here raping somebody, going back and say, well, he's rich, we can just pay for the crime. No, you still get punished, because you're going to have to live under the basic rules of everything. Everybody's still under the basic rules, but you can upgrade your area by improving the rules, and the better it is, then you could also get, like, maybe more funding, or maybe, because you're going to get punished if you do crimes in other areas, and if you do crimes in your own area. And do crimes in your own area, you get, I think I wrote this down somewhere. But anyway, this is kind of a rough overview of how it could be.